Being a parent can be stressful on a good day. There has recently been unprecedented parental stress and concern over our children's learning and mental health. The question is what we as parents can do about it. I'm Sarah Cunningham, parent of 3 beautiful children, special education teacher, and the family advisory head for the Neuro Outcomes Lab at Sick Kids Hospital, joined today by Dr. Tricia Williams.
I'm Trish Williams. I've been a clinical neuropsychologist at Sick Kids for the last 10 years. I'm also the director of the Neuro Outcomes Lab and the iInteract North virtual parenting program. I'm also a parent of 2 boys. Today, Sarah and I will be discussing children's mental health, the impact of extreme stressors, and the strategies that can promote coping and well-being for our families. We acknowledge we're recording this in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, but we're going to be talking about universal lessons as educators, as parents, and clinicians that can be applicable across other life stressors, whether it be the loss of a loved family member, a family breakdown and discord between partners, job loss and financial insecurity, need to move to a different area of the country or world. And these major stressors impact on families, both the kids and the parents. So we hope a lot of the strategies and the circumstances we talk about today are helpful to parents as they navigate different big stressors that happen. It was our family advisory group that recommended doing this podcast. In busy lives, going to another website or reading another handout may not be the best way to use our valuable time. And so we, Sarah and I, hope that this podcast meets the needs of our families. So let's get started in talking about what contributes to children's mental health.
Well, I think the first thing we have to remember is that we all know that children thrive on routine, and that even the slightest change in that routine can result in anxiety and feelings of uncertainty, which results in behavior. So now look at our current situation. We are in a pandemic, and it's not a slight change in routine. The whole routine has changed. Not only is home life looking different these days, but the consistency and the structure that they were experiencing at school has also been changed as well. Everything that they have known has been changed, from interactions with family to having to wear a mask everywhere they go, how they've interacted with their teachers, how they interact with their friends, whether or not they're going to see their grandparents, not being able to go with mom and dad to the grocery store. They're no longer allowed to go outside and play on public playgrounds. And we have to remember what that looks like to a child. Both of their worlds have been torn upside down, and that it is almost natural that they're going to have feelings of anxiety and feelings of uncertainty as they try and navigate their new normal.
We expect a lot of our kids, and we forget how important routine is for them.
Absolutely. There's so many changes that have occurred and that these little people are supposed to be able to deal with and cope with, that we need to really look at the change in routines and how that this has been affecting them and how it will continue to affect them as we go through this together.
At times of stress, kids' needs, kids' behaviors, kids' whininess, their tantrums, they may increase in response to, as Sarah said, this disruption in routine.
Knowing all of this, what have we learned and experienced so far about COVID-19 and children's mental health? So we know that COVID has brought on an increased amount of stress and uncertainty in families. We also know that it's been difficult for families and children to go through isolation. The reality is that it's made us isolate from our family and friends. It's made us stay home from our jobs, from our schools. And there becomes a concern that if you leave your house, that you're going to get the virus. And I think this really resonates with me as a parent because my children are very fearful if we go to the grocery store, if we go to work. They're worried. And these feelings are a genuine concern and anxiety about contracting the virus or having a family member get sick.
There are studies emerging what the impact of this crisis has been on children. And, there's, as Sarah shared, for some kids, it's, increased anxieties and worries for their own safety, for the safety or health of their parents. For some kids, personal experience from my 2 boys, there may be sort of increased emotional reactions, behavioral outbursts, tantrums, that kind of thing. The more oppositionality, like, in plain language, not doing what they're told when they're told to do it. Parents are also concerned about their child's sleep and feeding. For some kids, with maybe more behavior concerns, you're seeing, increases in that activity or that behavior challenge. For kids who may be on more the anxious side, you're seeing maybe more attention seeking around attachment, wanting to be closer, as Sarah shared, worries about their parents and fears about that separation. For some parents, it can be a regression in their child's skills. So acting younger, previously learned skills seem to be, not where they were. And that can be a real fear for parents and what this means. But I want to reassure parents that it is normal in terms of when kids are going through this stress and other stressors to have a couple steps back in terms of their developmental independence.
But in saying that, kids are also showing their resiliency as well. They're learning that there's a new normal, and returning to school has been different than what they're used to. The classrooms look different. The school environment looks different. For example, parents are not allowed on school property. Mm-hmm. Children aren't allowed to share resources or touch or be close to their friends and teachers.
I think as clinicians and scientists, we're most concerned about the kids who entered into this time of stress with pre-existing needs. So children with diagnoses of ADHD or autism, children with learning needs and intellectual disabilities, oppositional defiant disorder. And these kids we know, thrive in routine, thrive from extra support that may be given by a parent or by an educator or a therapist. These children are vulnerable for two reasons. Well, they were vulnerable before in terms of accessing mental health and support at their school. Those resources were suddenly taken away. And then parents are expected to take on the role of therapists in the home. And in times where routine and those services are not available, we're obviously worried about those kids' needs and making sure they get support and their parents get support. For those parents whose child, had a special education need, they're even more worried about what this impact is in terms of loss of school, loss of support, loss of maybe therapeutic gains. And so we've seen in, reports to date in literature and what's being reported in across different countries facing these stresses, increases in these symptoms during lockdown, during the transition back to school, and the behavior and the emotion issues that predated this stress, these may be getting worse. These kids were kids that really did need routine, that did need parents who maybe had more energy, and also who needed the resources that were available to them at the community level, at schools, and all of a sudden, those families were left without that support. So unlike, school holidays that are known about and can be planned for, this current situation has resulted in taking away that predictability that is so important, and also those supports. Mm-hmm. If you're a typically developing kid, parents are stressed about being out of school. If your child's losing school and they already were behind, or the family felt they had special needs, are they going to fall further behind?
Like there are huge gaps, and I'm assuming, it's safe to assume that they're probably occurring everywhere.
Yeah. And I think that, you and I've chatted about that, and I've also had the opportunity to speak with parents from across the province at this time, during school closures, but also now. And this worry about getting the needs and the supports in this time is real. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we're particularly concerned about making sure that parents' needs feel heard and that we can match them to appropriate supports.
Oh, absolutely.
Sarah and I talked earlier this year during maybe more of the heightened lockdown, and she has such a wonderful way of helping you realize as a parent that it's okay not that they don't know their multiplication tables yet, or that they haven't kept up with their spelling.
From a teacher perspective, I do want parents to know that the time that you're spending with your children and have been spending is not wasted time. You're building those connections. You're building that relationship. You're finding out at home what works for your children. If your child is having a meltdown, you as the parent are there and able to come up with strategies together on how to help your child. So please, I don't want you to think that the time without service at home has been wasted time.
Beautiful. I think Sarah's approach is really appropriate to hear and to try to believe the best you can that the time you spend with your kids is so important, and not necessarily getting on top of every single a homework assignment or task that you feel like your kid needs to learn. And that can bring your own stress down.
Absolutely. We missed a lot of homework assignments at my house and chose to go for a walk or a hike instead.
So important, even though your intellectual brain sometimes thinks, and particularly maybe our kids who are at risk, parents feel like, oh my gosh, if I'm not on top of it every single day, and that creates that stress for everybody. So, given what we know, what can we as parents do to support our kids during times of stress?
So the first thing I think we need to do is we need to acknowledge that it's okay to have feelings.
Cheers to that. That'd be funny.
Yes. We need to validate their feelings. That lets them know that it's okay and that these feelings are normal. Because honestly, we're feeling it too. And I think to sort of put on a mask and hide your feelings is doing a disservice to your child. You need to let them know that their feelings are okay and that you understand how they're feeling. I think we also need to provide them with safe ways to express their feelings. So, Mommy, I'm feeling scared. There should be a follow-up discussion about that, or at least a validation that, honey, I know it's a scary time and I'm feeling that too. And just hearing you say those words sometimes is enough just to alleviate that anxiety, and they're able to carry on with their normal day. I also think it's important to understand and accept the differences in reaction between children. Some children will face adversity and keep going, resilient in their efforts to maintain a sense of normalcy that they find comfort in. Others will not be able to carry on as easily, and this is where you may see some of the behaviors occurring that we've been speaking about today. I have 3 children, and their reaction to this pandemic has varied very differently between the 3 of them. With one of my children, you would never even know anything was going on. She's very much into routine. She's going to school online. You would have no idea that anything has changed. But she needs that for herself to cope with what's happening. My other 2 are a little bit on the other end of the spectrum, and they are not really enjoying the lockdown, and they're taking it a little bit harder. We have seen some, as we talked about, the meltdowns and the refusal to do things.
And it's okay to tell your kids that this is hard for all of us.
I think it's very important that you're honest with your children to the degree that they're able to understand and are comfortable with. And you know your children the best, so you'll be able to determine what degree of honesty you do tell. And I can give a personal example here. When my children were anxious about me returning back to work, they were very concerned that I was going to catch the virus and get sick. We have tried to shelter them from news and sort of the magnification of how serious this virus really is. But they were still, in what they do know, they were worried that I was going to get sick. Many nights before school started did I console and have crying children asking, Mommy, please don't go to work. Mommy, I don't want you to get sick. And so my husband and I had to devise a quick plan on how we were going to address their concerns and their anxieties. So the next day I showed them my school backpack. My backpack looked a little different than it does in the previous years of school supplies and paper. In it, there was hand sanitizer and gloves and my masks and a face shield. And I explained to them that these were all the things that Mommy was going to use to help keep her safe. And I think that them being able to see that and know that Mommy was doing everything that she could, it gave them that sense of relief. In all of this scariness, we do have a little bit of control. It shows I was honest with them that the virus is real and that it is out there, but that Mommy was taking all of the precautions necessary to keep everybody safe. And I think that was very beneficial for them to see and to hear in them being able to accept that I was returning to work.
And I love Sarah's tailored honesty example, because on the flip side, there's an honesty, but there's also exposure to a lot of anxiety-provoking information out there, the daily counts. Just making sure that as much as we're honest, we're not exposing them to too many details that can be overwhelming as an adult, and a child may be more sensitive to that amount of information. Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about routines, and in times where things are unpredictable, maybe on a weekly basis, keeping or creating new routines are really important. Keeping ones maybe around bedtime, keeping ones as a family if you have a protected night for a movie night, keeping that so that there is some consistency at a time where other things are out of our control can be really helpful for us as parents and for our kids.
Children are showing resiliency in these new routines.
Yeah.
I mean, they have to be hand sanitized now before they enter the building, and they have to walk 6 feet away in line. They're learning these new routines, so they're becoming the new normal, which I think is important to note. That
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things in the Interact North program we talk about, and it's just a common sense thing we often forget to do, is really celebrating those small wins in our kids, looking for those, we call them sort of the positive opposites, like, the things you want to see more of. So you see your child actually putting on that mask. Those moments are so important to celebrate, just little things you notice your child doing well in the day-to-day. When you start actually giving them specific praise, not just good job, but actually, you know what? I really love the way, you ate your breakfast so calmly today. Those little wins, and they're actually not little.
No.
And celebrating them actually set a different tone, getting us away from the kind of nagging that we all fall into, those traps, and just looking for the negative and trying to correct those. Tantrums and meltdowns are signs they're done. So first and foremost, the strategies that can help a family are actually keeping calm as they are expressing their emotions, and however they do, maintaining a calm, open, and accepting stance as a parent is so important, even though we ourselves may not feel calm in these situations. Modeling the calmness and getting through that tantrum or that meltdown is actually the best way. You're modeling that regulation you want to see more in your kid. And during tantrums, letting it run its course, making sure that it's a safe environment for your child to have that, or moving them to a safe environment, being accepting of it, but also keeping the child safe. But also try not to, get into negotiating or really problem solving in that moment, or figuring out exactly what's triggering. Because if you can remember a time when you've been really upset, sometimes you can't pinpoint the exact reason. So not trying to figure out in the moment what's going on for your child. And the worst is sort of try not to give in when it's over something that they want to get the tantrum over with. It sounds really mean because, of course, at a time where we're all stressed, we want to be maybe a little more indulgent with our kids. I know I have. But at the same time, keeping that consistency as a family, when it's so easy sometimes to sort of say this would really solve it and give a quick fix. Recognize that, when we do give in, sometimes it's not actually in our kids' best interest. They learn that those tantrums actually get what they want. The best thing we know as professionals is to stay calm, say that you're there for your child, but don't try. Just be there for your child. Let it run its course. And then maybe after, in a time of calmness, talk about what happened. Keep them safe. Keep
safe.
Calm yourself.
Let them go through it.
Yeah, try not to problem solve in that moment, right?
And just being there for your children, reassure them that you're there for them and that they are safe and that you understand how they're feeling.
Nice. Yeah. It sounds easy, like, just be calm, like, come on. But it is really hard for all of us who are tired and who, are out of routines. So I don't know if it was you, but there's a parent that quoted in one of our studies that, no one asked me how I was doing. And I think a lot of our work came out of making sure that we do acknowledge the parent experience. So what about parent stress at this time?
This time, there's parent stress all the time. There's the stress to be the perfect parent. And I think during a time of stress or anxiety, that is even amplified. To be that perfect parent, to always make the right choices, to always know what to do. And I think that we as parents often fall into that trap of being that perfect parent and meeting an ideal that is impossible.
And when we don't meet it, you're very critical of yourself.
Absolutely. And second guess every decision that you make.
I think we've talked, Sarah and I, a lot over the years about that aspiration of the perfect parent and pressures out there, whether they be by media or by almost like an excessive abundance of parenting perspectives and parenting expertise. And I think Sarah and I sit here on this podcast, both as educators. Sarah's an educator, I'm a clinician, but we're also both parents, and know that there's not one perfect way. There's good parenting strategies, and we're hoping we're distilling some of them for you today. But there's also that need to sort of be confident in your decisions and not second guess yourself. So I think parents need to recognize that that almost internal pressure they're putting on themselves and that justification, and in a way put blinders up when those questions are asked when they can, or notice that that's actually increasing their own insecurities as a parent.
We need to look at that and say, we might always be judged for our decisions, whether it's to send your child to school, whether what you pack in their lunch, whether you're going to prescribe your child medication or not. I think there's so many decisions that parents have to make on a day-to-day basis that we don't need to concern ourselves with what other people think. And I know that's really hard because you don't want to be judged, but be an informed parent. Know your options, do all your research, and then make a decision. And be confident. Be confident in your decision that at that moment you made the best decision for your child.
You know, I could cite so many studies from pre-pandemic that, parent mental health is one of the number one predictors of children's happiness, their own mental health. And of course, at this time, it's very understandable for us all to be stressed.
I feel the stress of the changing roles. We joke at our house that now that our children are home, we take on the role of mom, dad, custodian, school secretary, lunch lady, teacher.
We're taking on these multiple roles for our children, whether they're back at school, they're home. There's been tremendous changes for the children and for us as parents.
We become less available because we're so busy. And I think, too, we're less patient. So not only are there routines in an upheaval, but now we as parents are showing that stress and that anxiety.
We may be exhausted ourselves to be our best selves, and that's okay. We have to recognize that that's okay.
The tank is empty.
We are depleted. But this cycle then, that we're less available and responsive to our kids, then naturally the behaviors or the concerns that we have about our child, they may elevate. They may, it's like putting a bit of fuel on the fire. So children who are more stressed, maybe acting out a bit more, not doing what they're told, or, wanting to even follow any routines, are met with parents who are just exhausted because they're balancing so many roles. And so then the parent really, and understandably, isn't up to being the optimal parent. But then what happens is that they're not as responsive to their kids' needs. The kid, maybe gets a little bit more out of control. Then that triggers the parent to be more stressed and frustrated, worried about what it all means. And then again, it creates a cycle of this stress in the home. I'm going to tackle the fun part of the strategies for you as a parent and managing your own stress at this time. But I think both Sarah and I agree that, we can sit here and say, try this, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't squeeze in another moment in my day. But I think she and I we agree that some of these things are really, really important in managing your own stress. Because as we started this podcast, we were talking about how important our own well-being, our parent well-being, is for our child's mental health. So one of the best things I'll say that you can do with your, is to manage your own stress at this time and other times of stress that come up. When you cope with your stress well, you're modeling it to your child, and you will have more energy and be a better parent to your child. I'm going to use the term that we joked about as we prepared, self-care. And, when I sit in my desk here at Sick Kids and say, how's self-care going for you? I can almost, and I never see the eyes roll, but I can almost hear them even on this podcast. And maybe you're like, oh my goodness, there's just no time. I can barely have time to get my groceries this week because of all that's going on. But I do think in those small little moments, and it may be 10 or 15 seconds where we take that breath before, we know we're heading into maybe yelling at our child or losing it, that those moments for ourselves, that breath before yelling, can be really, really powerful. If you yell a little less from that, that's a huge win. One other thing to take consideration is if you do yell, and you will, we are going to yell, or we are going to have times where we ourselves may be having meltdowns, and we all lose it, is to practice some self-compassion and forgive yourself. And if you can do that versus hanging on and sort of hating yourself and being so mad at yourself for doing it, You actually will, if you forgive yourself and move on and try again the next day, it can change the sort of tide of negativity and frustration in the home. But I can't emphasize it enough, both clinically, but also, as a parent myself, that sometimes that 5 minutes that you may take during the day to take a breather for yourself so you can enter into a situation that's stressful, how impactful that can be for you and for your child. An analogy I use a lot with my families and with my own life is the oxygen mask. And if you've ever been on a plane, we're not on them right now, but if you've ever been on a plane, the flight attendant will tell you you need to put on your oxygen mask before you put on your children's. But even the thought of that for myself, it seems so counterintuitive to that mama bear that we all have. Like, of course, we're going to put it on our children first. But if you actually know how that would play out, if you don't have oxygen for yourselves, you're going to be absolutely no good for your children. The investment you make in yourself will ultimately be improving your child. And it shouldn't be seen sort of as selfish or time, just time for you. It's actually indirectly going to benefit your child. And I'm not saying go out and do 10 yoga classes to learn how to breathe properly. I'm saying take that breath. And when you can enter into a situation with a little bit more calmness, you actually are taking more control. You're modeling for your child some self-control, and you feel better and more energetic in the role of a parent.
And I think that we need to remember that we are powerful as parents, and we are resourceful, and that ultimately we know our children the best.
And one point I would just add, I guess, from our own experience, and the reason we have the projects that we have and the relationships we have with people like Sarah is that because we know if we actually put our parents first, or we consider the needs of our parents, that is ultimately going to serve our kids the very best. How do you know when you actually need some help? That feeling of overwhelmed, we're all overwhelmed. When do we actually need to ask for more help? And I think as parents, there's this ideal that we don't need help, we can do it all. But, there can be times where that feeling of overwhelmed really just persists in every second of our life and decreases our mood, maybe our hope, maybe feelings of guilt that we have as a parent.
The guilt of feeling that you have to be that perfect parent. Yeah. And on days when you're not, and let's be honest, there's a lot of days that you're not going to be that perfect parent, that it's okay. But then it leads into, if it's persistent guilt, that you're feeling that, every day, and that you're no longer an effective parent, then that would be a time that you would seek some help.
I think recognizing when that really starts to get in the way of being there for your child, or feeling, hope for your child and for you as a parent. When you feel like you've exercised every single tool, or you just don't even feel like trying those tools anymore, maybe these are times to reach out. These are maybe signals that you need more help. And often the first step is talking to your pediatrician or family doctor. There's a lot of mental health resources available on websites such as About Kids Health, and we've touched on some of the main ideas and suggestions from those websites today. About Kids Health has a lot of great meditation exercises that are available. We also have programs at Sick Kids being developed, such as the iInteract North, which is a virtual parenting program designed before this pandemic, but for families who really want to sharpen and learn some potentially new parent strategies to help them cope with maybe challenging behaviors or stresses in the home. We hope that the take-home message for our families from the podcast is that the stress is real and it does take a toll. If you realize as a parent that you really do need more help, it's the time to reach out to your family doctor or community mental health agencies. I hope what we've emphasized is that amidst all times of uncertainty, the relationship you have with your kid, that is the one to work on. Sometimes not stressing as much about all of the to-do lists that you may have from a school perspective. It's okay to not worry about the times tables. Getting back to the sort of just the fundamentals of playing with your kid, being with your kid, and responding to your kid. That relationship with your kid is something that can be a solid investment at this time, regardless of all the uncertainty, and actually may be the saving grace for you as a parent and for your child.
You know your child the best, and you're there for your child, and that's really, at the end of the day, regardless of strategies or school or work, whatever sort of factors there are, is that you're there for your child, and that you know them, and that they know that you're there for them, sort of rooting them on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's maybe the message that we want to leave.
Thank you for listening. We hope you found it helpful. This podcast was sponsored by the Canadian Institutes of Health Research Operating Grant, COVID-19, Mental Health and Substance Use Service Needs / Delivery.